The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Science Consortium stretched across the horizon like a frozen rainbow. Inside, beings from 47 different worlds had gathered for what many believed would be their final meeting about the Kepler system. The air hummed with tension as holographic displays showed the same terrible truth over and over again. Kepler 442 was dying. Dr. Hyenwu Park sat quietly in the small section reserved for humans. Around him, the galaxy's smartest creatures debated in languages that sounded like music, mathematics, and pure energy. His translator device worked hard to turn their complex thoughts into words he could understand. The star at the center of the Kepler system had grown old and angry. Soon, very soon, it would explode in a burst of light and fire that would destroy everything for millions of miles in every direction. 12 planets full of living beings would simply disappear. 40 billion people, creatures, and civilizations would die. But for 30 years, the best minds in the galaxy had tried to solve this problem. The Zephyrians looked like living glass and could think in ways that bent space and time. The Nyx existed in several dimensions at once and saw probability like other beings saw color. The ancient architects had built machines that could calculate the movement of entire galaxies. All of them agreed on one thing: nothing could be done. The energy needed to stop a star from exploding, announced the Zephyrian speaker. Her voice, like crystal bells, would require the power of 17 advanced civilizations working together. We do not have this power. The Nexari representative, a shimmering form that seemed to exist in several places at once, added their analysis. We have calculated the possibility of moving 40 billion beings to safety in 18 months. The chance of success is almost zero. One by one, each species presented their findings. The mathematics were always the same. The Kepler system was doomed. The star would explode, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Hyenwu listened to it all. He understood maybe half of what they said, but he got the main idea. These incredibly smart beings had spent decades working on this problem and found no solution. They were ready to give up. As the meeting moved toward its end, Hyenwu stood up. His movement caused a small wave of surprise through the chamber. Humans rarely spoke at these meetings. Most species considered them well-meaning but not very bright compared to the others. I would like to look at the data, Hyenwu said in his simple, clear voice. The crystal being who led the meeting flickered with what might have been amusement. Dr. Park, this problem has challenged our greatest thinkers for 3 decades. Your species, while enthusiastic, lacks the mathematical sophistication too. Maybe, Hyenwu interrupted politely, but I would still like to see the information. The request was so unusual that it caused a buzz of conversation throughout the chamber. The beings whispered, clicked, sang, and thought at each other in dozens of different ways. Finally, they voted to let the human look at their data. Most of them were simply curious about what he would do. As the other species began to leave, preparing to start the impossible task of evacuating 12 worlds, Hyenwu remained behind. The holographic display still showed Kepler 442, angry and red, counting down its final months. Dr. Ji-Yoon Kim, his assistant, approached carefully. She knew Hyenwu well enough to recognize the look in his eyes. Sir, they are not wrong about how big this problem is. Every calculation shows that stopping a supernova is impossible with our current technology. Shows that they are thinking about it the wrong way, Hyenwu said, still staring at the dying star. They are trying to solve this like a math problem, but sometimes the answer is not in the numbers. Ji-Yoon frowned. What do you mean? Think about human history, Hyenwu said, finally turning away from the display. How many times were we told something could not be done? Flying was impossible until the Wright brothers did it. Going to space was impossible until we did it. Splitting the atom, talking across oceans, curing diseases that killed millions, all impossible until humans tried anyway. But this is different, Ji-Woon protested. This is a star. The forces involved are beyond anything we have ever dealt with. Hyenwu smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile humans wore when they were about to do something that everyone else thought was crazy. Ji-Yoon, what makes humans different from all these other species? She thought about it. We are not as smart. We do not live as long. We cannot bend space or think in multiple dimensions, right? But what can we do that they cannot? Ji-Yoon was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, understanding began to dawn on her face. We try things that should not work. Exactly. These beings are so smart that they can calculate exactly why something it is impossible. They can prove with perfect mathematics that a solution does not exist. But humans, Hyenwu gestured toward the image of the doomed star. We have never been good at accepting that something cannot be done. The chamber was empty now, except for the 2 humans and the holographic star. In 18 months, Kepler 442 would explode. 40 billion beings would die. The galaxy's smartest creatures had proven it was impossible to prevent. But Dr. Park was human, and humans had a long history of doing impossible things. 3 weeks later, Haiyan Wu floated in a small research station that orbited around Kepler-4 for to be the largest planet in the doomed system. Through the thick windows, he could see the angry red star that everyone said would kill them all. Down below, millions of beings went about their daily lives, not knowing that the galaxy's smartest creatures had already given up on saving them. His team was small. Jion worked at a computer covered in numbers and charts, trying to understand how stars worked. Dr. Minho Lee stared at screens showing the inside of Kepler 442, watching the nuclear fire that kept it burning. Engineer Soyoung Choi fixed broken equipment with tools and spare parts. Pilot Dong Haiyan Yu kept their small station flying safely around the planet. The aliens want to stop the explosion, Haiyan Wu explained to his team. He pointed at a hologram of the star floating in the middle of their tiny meeting room. They want to pump huge amounts of energy into the core, or cool it down, or somehow keep it burning normally forever. Minho looked up from his calculations. That would need technology we do not have. The power required would be like trying to hold back an ocean with our bare hands. Exactly, Haiyan Wu said. They are fighting the star. They want to wrestle with something that weighs more than 1,000,000 Earths and burns hotter than anything we can imagine. Of course they think it is impossible. Soyoung stopped working on a broken sensor and turned around. What do you mean? Haiyan Wu changed the hologram to show pictures from Earth's history. Ships sailing across stormy seas, airplanes flying through clouds, rockets shooting toward the moon. When humans wanted to cross the ocean, did we try to make the water solid so we could walk on it? No, we built boats that worked with the water, not against it. When we wanted to fly, did we try to turn off gravity? No, we built wings that used the air to lift us up. Ji-yoon started to understand. You want to work with the supernova, not against it. Not just work with it, Haiyan Wu said, his eyes bright with an idea that scared and excited him at the same time. I want to use it. A supernova releases more energy in a few seconds than our sun will make in its entire lifetime. That energy goes out in all directions, like a bomb exploding in space. But what if we could aim it? The room became very quiet. Dong Haiyan spoke first. Aim a supernova. That sounds ... Crazy, Haiyan Wu finished. Yes, but think about it. If we could make the explosion shoot out in just one direction, like a giant space cannon, then the planets would be safe on the other side. Minho pulled up new calculations on his screen. The precision needed would be incredible. We would have to control 17 different things at exactly the right time. One mistake and we make the explosion worse, not better. That is how the aliens think, Haiyan Wu said. Perfect control, perfect timing, perfect calculations. But humans do not do perfect, we do good enough. Over the next week, the team worked on what they secretly called Project Longshot. Instead of trying to prevent the star from exploding, they would create a controlled explosion that shot its energy away from the 12 planets. Their plan was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. They would build machines that could create gravitational waves, like ripples in space itself. These machines would be placed around the star in a careful pattern. When the star began to collapse, the machines would push and pull on different parts of it, like invisible hands molding clay. If they did it right, the explosion would shoot out in a narrow beam, missing all the planets. When Haiyan Wu presented their plan to the Galactic Consortium, the reaction was immediate and universal. Every species said the same thing: impossible. The Zephyrian scientists calculated their chances of success: 0.001%, the crystal being announced. Statistically impossible. The Nexari looked at the plan from multiple dimensions. We see 17 critical failure points. If any one thing goes wrong, the explosion will be worse than if you do nothing. The ancient architects ran the plan through quantum computers that could simulate entire universes. Catastrophic cascade failure in 97% of scenarios. But the director of the consortium, an old being who had seen civilizations rise and fall, was curious. Dr. Park, your own species' mathematics must show you that this cannot work. Why do you persist? Haiyan Wu looked around the vast chamber filled with the galaxy's most intelligent creatures. Because you are thinking like machines. Perfect input, perfect output, but the universe is not a machine. It is messy and chaotic and full of surprises. You calculate what should happen. We prepare for what actually happens. The consortium agreed to let the humans try, mainly because they were curious to see what would happen. They gave Haiyan Wu a small amount of resources and an old orbital platform that nobody else wanted. Most of the aliens thought it was like giving children some blocks to play with while the adults handled the real work of evacuation. But as Haiyan Wu and his team began building their impossible machines, something interesting happened. The aliens started watching more carefully. They began to realize that humans approached problems in a way that none of them had ever seen before. The humans were not trying to control chaos. They were trying to dance with it. The aliens gave Haiyan Wu's team an old metal platform that floated in space like a rusty island. It had been used for mining asteroids years ago, and half the equipment did not work properly. The consortium leaders smiled politely when they handed over the keys. the way adults smile when children ask to help with important work. This should be sufficient for your experiment, the Zephyrian representative said, her crystal body flickering with what might have been amusement. We will continue with serious evacuation efforts while you play with your machines. Haiyan-Wu did not seem bothered by their attitude. He knew that humans had always been underestimated. It was one of their greatest advantages. His team grew by 2 people. Jamin Song had spent 20 years mining asteroids with nothing but basic tools and a good understanding of how gravity worked. He could feel the pull of space rocks in his bones and predict how they would move just by watching them. In-ho Baek was a musician who played traditional Korean instruments and understood rhythm and harmony better than most computers. I do not understand why we need a musician, Ji-yeon said as they watched In-ho tune his gyeojeum in the corner of their workshop. The universe has music, Haiyan-Wu explained. Everything vibrates. Stars, planets, even space itself. If we want to change how a star explodes, we need to understand its song. The team worked 18 hours a day, building their gravitational wave machines from spare parts and broken mining equipment. So-young performed miracles with a welding torch and determination, turning asteroid crushers into precision instruments. Dong-hyeon used navigation computers, meant for small ships to calculate the exact positions where their machines needed to be placed around the star. The aliens watched through their monitoring systems, fascinated by human methods they had never seen before. They recorded Jae-min holding pieces of equipment in his hands, feeling their weight and balance before deciding where to put them. They watched In-ho humming while he adjusted frequency settings, using his ear instead of mathematical formulas. To find the right harmonics, they are incorporating random variables into their design, an Exari observer reported to the consortium. Their calculations include something called Murphy's Law, planning for unspecified failures. Primitive chaos theory, the architects dismissed. They cannot possibly account for 17-dimensional probability matrices, but Dr. Yanesio Han, a new team member who studied human behavior, saw something the aliens missed. We are not trying to account for everything, she explained to Haiyan-Wu during one of their rare breaks. We are building flexibility into the system. When something breaks, and it will, we can fix it or work around it. The gravitational wave generators took shape slowly. Each one was different because they were built from different parts by different people. Jaemin's machines were rough but strong, built like the asteroid miners he had worked with for decades. So-young's were elegant and efficient, every wire and circuit placed with precision. In-ho's hummed with strange harmonics that made the alien observers uncomfortable. This inconsistency is unacceptable, a Zephyrian scientist complained. How can they expect 12 different machines to work together when no 2 are identical? Maybe that is the point, Yanesio said quietly. The humans worked without the advanced computer models that other species relied on. Instead, they tested each machine by hand, making adjustments based on how things felt rather than how they calculated. They expected parts to break and built replacements before they were needed. They planned for power failures, communication breakdowns, and equipment malfunctions that might happen at the worst possible moment. Your approach is very organic, the consortium director observed during one of his visits to the platform. Life is organic, Haiyan-Wu replied, wiping grease from his hands. Stars are organic too. In a way, they are born, they live, they die. You cannot control them with pure mathematics any more than you can control a living creature with mathematics. With 1 month left before the star's predicted explosion, their network of 12 gravitational wave generators was complete. The machines floated in space around Kepler 442, like a crown of metal and wire. 2 alien observers, their placement looked random. Some were close to the star, others farther away. There was no obvious mathematical pattern, no elegant symmetry. But Haiyan-Wu's team saw the pattern. It was like a musical arrangement, with each machine playing its part in a cosmic symphony. Jaemin had positioned them based on gravitational currents he could sense but not explain. In-ho had tuned them to harmonics that sounded right to his trained ear. So-young had connected them with communication lines that could adapt if some machines failed. The aliens think we do not know what we are doing, Dong-han said, monitoring the increasingly worried messages from consortium headquarters. They are right, Min-ho laughed nervously. Half of this is educated guessing. The good half, So-young added, running her final checks on equipment that was held together with human stubbornness and spare parts. In the final week before the star's collapse, something interesting happened. Some of the younger alien scientists began asking questions about human methods. They wanted to understand how a species could build something so complex without perfect calculations. They were discovering that there might be more than one way to solve an impossible problem. But time was running out. In 7 days, Kepler 442 would begin its final collapse. 40 billion beings watched their sky and waited to see if human stubbornness could accomplish what alien genius could not. The countdown clock on their small platform showed 3 days, 14 hours, and 27 minutes until Kepler 442 would begin its final collapse. Across 12 worlds, 40 billion beings looked up at their sky and wondered if they would live to see another sunrise. The consortium's massive evacuation ships had managed to move only a tiny fraction of the population to safety. Most people simply went about their daily lives. Because there was nothing else they could do, on the human platform, Haiyan-Wu's team made their final preparations. Their 12 gravitational wave generators floated in space around the dying star like strange metal flowers. Each machine was unique, built from salvaged parts and held together by human determination. The alien observers had long since stopped trying to understand the pattern. To their sophisticated minds, the placement looked completely random. Consortium Command is pulling back to minimum safe distance, Dong Han reported, watching the alien ships retreat to positions far from the star. They think we are about to make everything much worse. Maybe we are, Ji-Yoon said quietly, staring at her calculations. The numbers still looked impossible, even to her human eyes. We stick to the plan, Haiyan-Wu said firmly. We have come too far to doubt ourselves now. Yonesio monitored the stress levels of her teammates through biometric sensors. Everyone was afraid, but they were the kind of afraid that made humans work harder, not give up. All teams report ready for activation sequence. 3 days before the predicted stellar collapse, they began turning on their machines. The gravitational waves started as tiny ripples in spacetime, so small that only the most sensitive instruments could detect them. But gradually, like stones thrown into a still pond, the ripples began to spread and grow. The alien monitoring stations recorded everything with scientific fascination. Their instruments showed that the human intervention was creating exactly the kind of chaotic instabilities that their computer models had predicted would make the situation worse. The star's magnetic field began to twist and fluctuate in ways that seemed completely random. They are destabilizing the stellar core, a Zephyrian scientist reported with alarm. The collapse will be accelerated and unpredictable. But chaos was exactly what the humans wanted. As Inho explained to the recording devices, his fingers moving over his gaijim as if the music could somehow reach across space to the dying star. A song is not just notes played perfectly. It is the timing, the pauses, the way sounds flow. Together, this star needs to sing a different song, and sometimes you have to break the old rhythm before you can create a new one. The gravitational resonance built over 72 hours. Each machine added its voice to a symphony that only humans seemed able to hear. Jamin made constant adjustments based on instincts developed from decades of working with gravity and massive objects. His changes were tiny, just slight alterations in timing and frequency, but they were adjustments that alien computers would have needed hours to calculate. Generator 7 is showing harmonic drift, Soyoung reported from her engineering station. Frequency is shifting outside normal parameters. Leave it, Haiyan-Wu ordered. It is finding its own rhythm. The aliens watching from their safe distances could not understand this decision. Their perfect machines would never allow such variance, but the humans had built their system to be imperfect, to adapt and change as conditions shifted. On the second day of activation, something unexpected happened. Generator 4 began resonating with Generator 9 in a way that created a completely new harmonic pattern. According to the original plan, this should not have been possible. According to alien calculations, it should have caused catastrophic failure. Instead, it made the system work better. The machines are talking to each other, Inho said with wonder, listening to frequencies that existed beyond normal human hearing but somehow felt familiar to his musician's soul. They are improvising. Minho monitored the star's core temperature and pressure. We are approaching the point of no return. Core density is reaching critical levels. Through the platform's thick windows, they could see Kepler 442 beginning to change. The star's surface flickered with patterns of light that had never been seen before. Across 12 worlds, beings of every species stopped their daily activities to watch their sun dance with impossible colors. Then, at 1431 Universal Time, something beautiful and terrible happened. The star's core reached the moment of collapse, the point where nuclear fusion could no longer support the massive weight of stellar material. For 17 minutes, Kepler 442 balanced on the edge between controlled collapse and catastrophic explosion. In the Human Command Center, alarms screamed warnings about energy levels beyond all known measurements. Yonesio watched her teammates work with desperate precision, their stress indicators showing levels that should have caused panic but instead seemed to sharpen their focus. Core temperature exceeding all models, Ji-Yoon reported, her voice steady despite the sweat on her forehead. Gravitational waves at maximum amplitude, Jamin added, his hands moving over controls that vibrated with forces that could crush planets. All generators holding pattern, Soyoung confirmed, though 3 of her machines were running far outside their design specifications. Stick to the plan, Haiyan-Wu said, though he could feel his heart pounding. Trust the chaos. At exactly 1433 Universal Time, Kepler 442 exploded with the force of 1 billion hydrogen bombs detonating every second. But instead of expanding outward in all directions like a sphere of destruction, The supernova erupted in a narrow, brilliant beam that shot into empty space like the galaxy's brightest lighthouse. The 12 inhabited worlds, positioned safely in the shadow of the explosion, were bathed only in gentle radiation and the most spectacular auroras anyone had ever seen. 40 billion lives continued, and the impossible had become possible. The message reached Earth 3 months after the supernova. Across the home planet of humanity, people stopped what they were doing to watch the news broadcasts. The impossible had happened. A small team of humans had saved 40 billion lives by doing something that the galaxy's smartest beings had declared impossible, but the real change was happening far from Earth. In the crystal halls of the Galactic Consortium, for the first time in the organization's 1,000-year history, every species had gathered not to solve a crisis, but to understand how one had been solved. Hien Wu stood before the largest assembly in galactic history. Representatives from 90 different worlds filled the vast chamber, all wanting to hear how humans had accomplished the impossible. His small team sat nearby, still looking tired from their ordeal, but quietly proud of what they had achieved. "You want to know our secret?" Hien Wu began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "But there is no secret. We simply approached the problem differently than you did." The Zephyrian speaker, her crystal form reflecting rainbow light, interrupted with something that sounded like confusion. "Our calculations remain unchanged. Your probability of success was statistically zero, mathematical impossibility. Your calculations were perfect," Hien Wu agreed, nodding respectfully. "That was the problem. You calculated every variable, modeled every possibility, and concluded it could not be done. But you forgot the most important factor, which was," asked the director, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. Ji-Yun stood up, her confidence growing as she spoke to beings she had once found intimidating. "You forgot that the universe does not follow perfect mathematics. It follows chaotic mathematics. And chaos is not your enemy if you learn to work with it instead of against it." A murmur of interest rippled through the chamber. The concept of deliberately using chaos as a tool was foreign to most species, who had spent millennia developing ways to eliminate randomness from their calculations. "Show them the recordings," Hien Wu said quietly. The chamber's displays came to life with footage from the human platform during the final hours before the supernova. The alien observers watched in fascination as Saw Young jury-rigged a failing power coupling with spare wire and determination. They saw Jamin making gravitational adjustments. Based on 20 years of asteroid mining experience, rather than computer calculations, they watched Inho tuning their machines by ear, finding harmonic frequencies that their quantum computers had missed completely. "This is not science," an Exari representative observed, their multidimensional form flickering with uncertainty. "This is intuition," Bo said Yanesio, speaking for the first time to the full assembly. "Science tells us what should happen. Intuition tells us what to do when it does not happen the way it should. Other species try to eliminate uncertainty. Humans try to use it." Minho activated a new display showing the moment when Generator 4 had begun resonating with Generator 9 in an unplanned harmonic pattern. "Our machines started working together in ways we never programmed. If we had built perfect systems, this could never have happened. But we built adaptive systems that could change when conditions changed. Flexibility over precision," Dong Hien added. "We planned for failure from the beginning. When things went wrong, we were ready." The chamber fell silent as the implications began to sink in. These advanced civilizations had spent thousands of years perfecting their technologies, eliminating chaos and randomness, creating systems that worked exactly as designed. But in doing so, they had also eliminated their ability to adapt when faced with truly unprecedented problems. An ancient architect, its machine consciousness older than most civilizations, spoke with something resembling wonder. "You deliberately introduced imperfection into your solution." "We introduced humanity," Hien Wu corrected. "Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes. We guess wrong. We build things that barely work. But we also improvise, adapt, and refuse to give up when logic says we should." The questions came rapidly after that. How did humans train their intuition? How could logical beings learn to embrace chaos? Was it possible to teach machines to improvise? But it was Inho who provided the answer that would reshape galactic thinking. Standing with his Gaiagium in his hands, he played a simple melody that filled the vast chamber with haunting beauty. "Music is mathematics," he said when the last note faded away. "But it is also more than mathematics. The spaces between the notes, the timing that makes you feel something, the way a song can move your heart, these things cannot be calculated. They can only be felt and understood through experience." The consortium voted that day to establish something unprecedented, the Department of Impossible Solutions. For the first time in galactic history, an entire branch of science would be dedicated not to perfecting existing knowledge, but to tackling problems that conventional wisdom declared unsolvable. Humanity would lead this department, bringing their chaotic, intuitive, stubbornly optimistic approach to challenges across the galaxy. Within months, human teams were working on everything from dimensional paradoxes to quantum consciousness transfer, armed with improvisation, determination, and the uniquely human belief that impossible was just another word for untried. As Hai prepared to leave the consortium headquarters, the director approached him one final time. I must ask, how did you truly know your plan would work? Haiyan Wu smiled, thinking of his team's dedication, their willingness to try when everyone else had given up, and the 40 billion lives they had saved through sheer human stubbornness. We did not know it would work, he admitted honestly. We just knew we had to try. You see, Director, the universe does not care about your calculations. It only cares about what actually works, and sometimes, the only way to find out what works is to try the thing that should not work at all.